Standing up in McKinney. This is According to Callus, coming to you on the 5th day of February, the year of our Lord 2025. And it is actually a palindrome day, if I'm not mistaken, if you're going to use the European way of putting down dates, which I do not, so I guess it really doesn't care. Today is episode 719. Let's put it this way. I am going to talk about school choice in the state of Texas, because every state's different and every state gets their own way of doing this. There are a whole lot of things going on in DC, real and imagined. And honestly, there's some things going on in Austin. But at the end of the day, the thing that closest to you affects you the most, whether it's the school district or the city council. So in light of that, I want to make sure that, as always, we focus on Texas. We put Texas first, and we talk about things that are going to impact you as a Texan, or Texian if you prefer. That means we have to talk about the school choice. Now, I also want to preface this by saying there are good people on all sides of this argument. There are good conservatives on all sides of this argument. And you have various determinations, let's put it that way, on what the right or the most conservative answer is for this. So I'm just going to go through a couple of options, and then we're going to go into my thoughts on the matter. So I sat on the platform committee for the state convention the last two terms. So that would have been 2024 and 2022. Both times, the idea that the Republican Party supports school choice was approved. Not without some debate, not without some angst, but it was approved under the idea or the concept that there would be no strings attached. Now, I got to tell you, that was what they sold. That's what they wanted to tell everybody. But the reality is, government never gives up control. Period. End of story. Once you understand that, you figure out the long-term game is, if we're going to give you some money now, we're going to come back in later and either take it back or take control, and sometimes both. So while I appreciate the folks that were advocating for that, it has always been my understanding that you can promise everything now, but if you can't deliver later, it doesn't matter. Okay, so in theory, school choice could work where you have your choice of going to any government school. And just so we're clear, when I say government school, normal people might call them public schools. Okay? And when I say normal, I just would say that's my nice way of saying normies, right? People that don't pay that close attention, aren't that involved, and quite frankly, don't care. They just want to stay out of the whole muck. They just want to raise their family, go to their jobs, pay their bills, and have a life where they're left alone. So, that being said, one version would be you get to pick the school that is in the area that best suits the need of your child, but it must be a government school. The other version is you can go to a private school and you get reimbursed, whether it's a voucher program or whatever else, and you get reimbursed a percentage of the cost or a set amount. We're going to say hypothetically they spend $10,000 per child in North Texas in a school district. Now, obviously, if you're out in West Texas or South Texas or even far North Texas, which would be the Panhandle, they probably spend less than $10,000 per student. But we're just going to use that for an argument, okay? Or for discussion, perhaps would be the better way of phrasing that. If you're going to voucher back $6,000 towards a parent that takes advantage of pulling their kid out to go to a private school, that school district still sees $4,000 per kid without doing anything for that kid. And the parent is still probably paying quite a bit more to go to private school. Okay? So that's another method. The other way of looking at school choice is you have a choice. You're going to pay, again, we're going to just say $5,000 of your taxes towards the school district that you live in, no matter what. But if you want to put your child in a private school or homeschool or unschool or whatever other variation that you want, you are free to do that, and the government's going to stay out of it. So you have your choice. You can do whatever you want. You're just going to end up basically paying twice. So those, as I see it, are probably the three simplest ways to explain that. Now, that being said, I think there's a lot of conflation of both terms and actions here. For one, I don't believe that a private religious school or a religious school that, we'll just call it, if you're a religious school, I don't think you are in your right mind if you're going to take government money, and that includes vouchers. Now, they say that the GI Bill, which I took advantage of the GI Bill, that was part of my enlistment plan, right? But they have said that the GI Bill does not affect what the colleges teach or what they do. Well, maybe, but I don't think it's any coincidence that every school that's taken money from government has moved directly to the left in the long term. I don't think that just happened out of the clear blue sky. Now, whether you're still getting a quality education, but from left of center, well, that's a different story. But suffice it to say, I'm not impressed. To set up a program that's going to give money to private entities and believe that government money isn't going to come with strings or isn't going to come with after the fact requirements is just foolish. Oh, sure, we're going to give you this money now, but 2 or 3 years from now, we're going to put requirements on it in order for you to still be eligible or for you to continue to get that money or participate in this program. It's a trap. It's a trap. No. Okay. So, all right. Now that I've laid that all out, I think it's fair to say that there are a lot of parents that cannot afford to get their children out of government schools. And they would take any means necessary or possible to get them out. I feel for them. I align with the anything that you must do. In fact, early on, when my children were young, I spent an enormous amount of our income to put our kids in private school. I think it was a good investment. I think that I'm going to reap the rewards long term. But I got to tell you, there was very little left after that. And if I would have had vouchers available, I probably would have been awfully tempted to take advantage of that. But if I would have taken that voucher, I would have been taking somebody else's money to educate my child when I'm already taking somebody else's money for my child's education in the government schools. So I'd almost be double dipping. So it's a touchy situation. And like I said, there's good people on all sides of this argument, good conservatives on all sides of this argument. So here's where we get down to the brass tacks. Now remember, this is according to Callus. The entire purpose of this is my show to tell you what I think and what I believe based upon what I know and what I've seen and what I've heard. And it's based upon that opinion that I provide you this information. And since I didn't mention it before and we're already basically 10 minutes in, I'll remind you what I ask from you, the return favor you can do for me just kind of giving you some things to think about, is to like, share, and subscribe to the program. Follow me on the social media of your choice. I have a page and a group at Facebook. I'm a pro at Gab. I drop in at MeWe. I'm occasionally on X. And guess what? You can still find the show on YouTube. I can't believe it, but it's still there. Outstanding. Now, that doesn't mean they haven't throttled me. It doesn't mean that I'm not shadow banned or whatever else. But the only way that I can overcome that, the only way that really I'm going to get past that, is you, my friends out there listening to me, take the time out, take the extra 30 seconds to give a thumbs up, click the notification, click the follow, whatever it is on your particular podcatcher, do me a solid. Every little bit helps. The algorithm is clearly not our friend. Okay, so in Texas, we have the Governor Abbott plan. What is that plan? That's a good question. I don't think anybody has a really good, succinct way to describe what the governor's looking to do. Then again, I'm not sure what's going to come out of the legislature either. So rather than take what we see to start with, let's just take a supposed outcome. Okay? Much like I said in the beginning where I was just kind of setting up the multiple scenarios, let's take a supposed outcome. That is, the state of Texas is going to set up some sort of voucher program for eligible children or families to take advantage of if they're in a school district that has, we'll call it, substandard performance, or they're in a current school that has substandard performance, and they can take and put their children into a parochial school or some other private school, and they're going to get a tax credit, aka voucher, for a specific amount of money. That's what I think is likely to come out of this, some way, somehow. Now, they're going to tell us that the desired outcome is to give low-income parents or medium-income parents better options. They're going to say this is going to help drive innovation through competition, which I would like to believe that. I really would. And I believe competition brings better outcomes, but we're going to put in pin on that for just a second. They're going to tell us that, you know, these children from middle, lower income families are being punished by forcing their children to go to the government school system. So we're going to give them a little money so they can get out. So there's a couple of different ways that this has an outcome, right? So you're going to have your proposed plan, the purpose that it was supposed to do, and then you're going to have an outcome. As we've seen, colleges have gone up dramatically in cost over the last 10 years, 20 years. I mean, it's a ridiculous amount of money to go to college. And quite frankly, many of the people that go to college these days get useless degrees. So they spend a ridiculous amount of money to come out with a useless degree, and they're basically debt slaves for at least 10, if not 20 years of their lives. Not seeing how we're setting them up for a good, solid future. But again, that's another subject, another issue. One of the reasons why the colleges were able to jack up their tuition so high is because of the easy debt, right? It was so easy for people to take on debt to go to school. And then, of course, there's government money involved. Government grants, government this, government that. Which, keep in mind, anytime you hear the word government, you need to think mine. Now, I know that sounds selfish. It sounds terrible, whatever. But government doesn't actually have any money that they haven't taken from somebody else. Whether that's the city council, the school district, the county commissioners, the state board of education, or the state legislature, or the governor for that matter, or anywhere in the federal hierarchy there, government doesn't have any money of their own. They took it from you, they took it from me, they took it from all of us, first and foremost. So when they say it's free money, no, it's really not free money. It's going to cost us bigly. So the outcome more than likely will mean that some of the private schools will take on more students. Some of the private schools will then raise their tuition because they know there's a guaranteed voucher amount they're getting out of there. A lot of these schools will thus become dependent on this extra money that they're getting from the vouchers. And the schools that choose not to take the vouchers, well, they might come under pressure. But again, we're just talking about likely outcomes. Now, the school district, they're going to lose money. They're going to lose the money that would normally come from the state from having butts in seats, which is one of the reasons why they're so hyper about making sure that the students attend, which is great. as long as they were getting something for showing up. So, in some sense, every private school, parochial school, that takes this government money is setting themselves up for failure long term. The other likely outcome is every school district that, and I'm going to be very gracious here, we're going to say has struggled to meet the ever-changing needs of the student body, mostly because of crazy restrictions and requirements put upon them by both the feds and the state. We're going to give them the massive amount of grace. We're not going to talk about incompetence. We're not going to talk about the overarching bureaucratic nightmare that is the school district. We're just going to say the school districts can't meet the requirements because they're ever changing and burdensome. We're going to leave all the other stuff out just for the time being. They're going to lose this money, which means it's going to be more difficult for them to meet those ever changing, burdensome requirements. Now, I'm right there with you when I'm thinking, well, great. If you've got a superintendent that's making north of $300,000 a year and he needs 4 assistants that are making well north of $100,000 a year, and you're spending darn near $1 million for 5 superintendents, what are you getting for your money? That's a very good question. But here's the other part of the scenario. So if they lose money and they cut that money, do you really think the superintendents are going to take a pay cut? Do you really think the assistant superintendents are going to be the ones that are on the chopping block? No, of course not. They're going to put the squeeze on you as parents. They're going to take away teachers' aides. They're going to take away teachers. They're going to pile more students in the classroom. They're going to make it as difficult for you as the parent, and quite frankly, as difficult as they can for you, the teachers, as they can, because they're not going to lose out. That's one of the things that, and again, I'm going to go on a slight tangent here. I've never understood. Why do the teachers, the rank and file teachers, always rally to protect the administration? What's in it for them? I don't see that the administration really does anything that ultimately benefits the teachers. Oh, sure, they'll protect a bad teacher, just like a teachers union would, right? Or they're going to hide little inconsistencies or pieces of misconduct or whatever else. They're going to bury it and ship them off. They're really good at doing that. But do they deliver a high quality product? Do they take care of their students? Do they listen to the actual customers, the parents, the taxpayers? Do they excel? Well, when they lose that money, it's going to be that much more difficult for them to be able to do all those things. So, I mean, again, I'm trying to be as entirely graceful or grace-filled as I can. And, I've heard and I've seen the memes now over the last week or so that if the school district loses money or the state, loses or reappropriates money for the schools, that the retirees are going to lose out. I'm not really sure how that works. I don't know all the ins and outs of TRS, but I think they're statutorily required to fund that, because there's a whole lot of other people that are in TRS beyond just teachers. So while that may be a legitimate fear, I don't know that it's real. So again, the outcomes are private schools are going to be basically set up for long-term failure, and the government schools are really going to run into more troubles. That's the likely outcomes. There are other things that are going to happen, of course, and I can't possibly know all of them, but I want you, my dear listeners, to just think about that. What is the likely outcome from what some have called the scam of a voucher program? The formerly independent private schools become less independent and less private, and the government schools become more dependent on what? They're going to cut costs, but they're not going to cut buildings. They're not going to cut bureaucracy. They're going to hurt the teachers, which are ultimately going to hurt the students, which is hurting the customers. And there's no way for that to come back on them because, unfortunately, the rank and file teachers, they're going to show up and vote for the same people on that school district board. And a lot of the parents are going to feel morally obligated to support the same people doing the same job, in a team with the superintendent to get you mediocre to slightly below average school districts. Now, again, there's lots of blame to be spread here, and I'm not trying to dunk on my own superintendent or my own assistant superintendents. I'm just saying we're paying an awful lot of money, and I'm not seeing the return. When you pay a CEO of a company $500,000, you expect that CEO to get things done and do a great job. I'm not seeing the return. And if you question that, well, you hate teachers. Again, do you think school choice is going to change any of this? In fact, I think it's going to make it even harder for the school districts. And woe be the private school that takes that government money only to find out that, oh, well, we actually don't control our curriculum anymore. Or, oh, no, we don't really have a say who gets to come to our school anymore. Or, oh, no, we're going to have our money yanked away, which is going to put us over an economic barrel because we had to expand to take in all these extra students, and now we're not going to have the ability to pay for it. Again, doomed to failure. Again, these are only likely outcomes. There's no guarantees, but I think this is what people are missing. They're so fixated on the notion of, well, yeah, I ought to be able to choose where my kid goes to school. Or, yeah, that's my money in the first place. I ought to be able to do what I want with it. Both of which are absolutely correct, mind you. But you can't get it all. All right. Now let's go on. So we've talked about a little bit about the purpose. We've talked about the outcome, or the likely outcome, if you will. Let's just talk about the sales pitch. The sales pitch is that middle to lower income parents are going to benefit the most. How? Well, the sales pitch is we're going to give you a voucher or a tax credit for, and again, I'm making up a number here. It could be higher, it could be lower, but we're just going to say $6,000. We're going to let you have $6,000 to use towards the education of your child. Now, if you have multiple children, it could be anywhere from $12,000 to $30,000, depending on how many children you have. And it used to be back in the old days, in parochial schools, the more children you had, the less your price per pupil went. But that doesn't really exist anymore. Of course, that's an entirely different subject because a whole lot of churches don't run their own schools anymore. They don't subsidize the cost of the school. Whether they're Catholic or Protestant, it's not a common occurrence anymore. Private Christian schools exist, usually with the cooperation of a number of churches, and then they are not dependent on any one, I would say parish, but I already said there. Well, I mean, I guess there are Protestant churches that use the term parish, but I would say congregation. So the sales pitch is this is going to give more money to those private schools. This is going to be a boon that everybody's going to benefit. The sales pitch is also going to be, hey, don't worry, the public schools are still going to get their cut. Keep in mind there's not going to be a student there, so they're getting money for doing nothing. Okay. But let me ask you, and again, well, no, I'll say that for the end. I'm sorry. So the sales pitch is everybody wins. That's what they're telling us. That's what the governor believes. That's what, his acolytes that are going to push this through believe. I'm not sure that the reality is going to line up with that. I've already given you my kind of likely outcomes, but I think the reality is going to be something less than what we're being promised. Surprise, surprise. But perhaps not as bad, or at least not initially as bad as some would claim. The reality is, as much as I theoretically dislike the idea of government schools, they exist. They're not going to go anywhere fast. As much as I am appalled by the theory and the philosophy behind those that were behind government-controlled education, whether it's John Dewey or Horace Mann or any number of other people, the whole Prussian mindset of turning out good little soldiers or good little factory workers or good little drones, I would tell you, I believe that the school districts, by and large, are working exactly how they were designed. I believe the vast majority of the students were always intended to not be able to think for themselves and to barely do anything higher level thinking. Now, at least, say what you want, but at least the European school districts or school systems or whatever you call it are a little more honest about it. They have this tract system, right? You're in a higher level track, you're in a mid-level track, and you're in a lower level track. I mean, at least that was the case when I was in school, because we used to hear about it. And they tried that, honestly, in one of the schools that I was in. They put all their high-level achieving students in a couple of classes to see how they would work. Nowadays, the mainstreaming technique has really, in my opinion, damaged the high-performance students and damaged the people that need the extra help. Now, I know there's all sorts of different things going on, and quite frankly, I don't pay that close attention to what the government schools are doing anymore because both of my children are graduated and not, in the real world now. So I don't know if there's been any new innovations or any new things done to change that significantly. So I'm not a subject matter expert on that. But what I can tell you is when you treat students like they're McDonald's hamburgers, you're going to end up with a whole lot of McDonald's hamburgers. And that's not a slight on McDonald's because McDonald's does something well. They're entirely consistent on the output of their product. Now, whether you love McDonald's hamburgers or you hate them, they're entirely consistent. You can go anywhere in the world and order a McDonald's hamburger and be reasonably sure that what you're going to get is going to be a McDonald's hamburger that you're familiar with. And I think that's what all of our government schools have built themselves as. The McDonald's of education. Now, if you should happen to have an extremely high achieving student, whether it's in mathematics, whether it's in literature, whether it's in music or some other form of art, or whether it's in, we'll just say, physical activity things, I think that you should have every opportunity to find the form of education that best suits them and best allows them to excel and become the brilliant person that they are. I'm not sure that it should come at the cost of the rest of the average people. And I'm certain it shouldn't come at a detriment to the people that need extra help. Now, I'm going to use a term. I know some people are bent about it, but when I went to school, there legitimately was a short bus. And the students that came off the short bus needed extra help. Now, when you're in grade school and you run across these folks, you're mean, you're harsh. That's what you are. You're a grade schooler. You have no filter. You have no couth. Now, granted, your parents probably drill that out of you later on, and the teachers probably deal with you when they catch you. But that's just the way it was for a long, long time. But those students, those children, are not less than. They shouldn't be discarded. They shouldn't be dismissed. If anything, society has made a choice over the decades or the 2 centuries or whatever that we've been doing this, that is actually where we're going to put our greatest amount of investment in, because we want for them to have some level of being able to take care of themselves, if at all possible. We want to take them from, we're just going to say, a bottom percentile and pull them up to where they could be semi-self-actualized, well-functioning adults. Is that always possible? No. Are we always successful? No. But that's what we've chosen to do. And I honestly got to tell you, of all the things we could spend money on, to me, that's the most worthwhile investment. That being said, the flip side of this equation is we spend a lot of money rewarding students that achieve athletically. I don't hate that. I think it's a misplaced priority personally. But the reality is we often ignore giving them the very same guidance in a proper education because everybody's so fixated at how well they throw a ball, catch a ball, run with a ball. Just saying. Now, you can say what you want, and you can say I'm being harsh or generalizing. Well, I'm definitely generalizing. But those students deserve to get a good education as well. So the system that we currently have in Texas, now I'm not going to say it's perfect. I'm not even going to say it's great. But it does one thing, and it does one thing extremely well. It recognizes the authority of a parent to take their student and put them into the private school of their choice and stay out of it. The government stays out of it. Put them into a homeschool situation or unschool situation or co-op school situation of their choice, and government stays out of it. Those students are set up to be highly successful. Is there a cost to it? Yes. Is it open to everybody? No. It would seem to me, with all that extra money that the school districts get for students not showing up, you would have invested it better. You would have been a better steward of that surplus. But constantly we hear about how the school districts don't have enough money. And I don't think it's that they don't have enough money, it's that they don't allocate it properly. We hear about how the teachers have to self-fund this, that, or the other thing. Well, while that's regrettable, I will tell you that I have to buy supplies. I've had to, do certain things over and above for a job that I've had because that's just what you do to keep a job. Now, maybe teachers have a little worse than I did. Maybe they don't. I don't know. But the reality is, if we paid somebody what society thinks they're worth, which I got to tell you, in North Dallas, a starting teacher's making $50K or better. That's not a bad salary. Now, unfortunately, due to all the inflation we've had over the last 4 or 5 years, that $50K is probably much closer to $40K in real terms now. But even still, $40K is not anything to dismiss. But perhaps, just perhaps, if we cut out some of the bureaucratic nonsense, if we cut out some of the extra stuff, if we eliminated some of those extra positions that, quote unquote, are assistant superintendents, for instance, and you've got another, let's say $500,000, you could allocate that to your, let's say 100 plus teachers and pay them more. I mean, if you're paying somebody $100,000 and you cut that slot, that means you can pay 10 teachers $10,000 more. You could pay 20 teachers $5,000 more. And I'm going to just guessing here, but I'm going to guess some of those teachers that are highly valuable and highly skilled would really be enthusiastic about a $5,000 a year bump in their pay. For a lot of them, that might be a 5 or 10% pay hike. Now, I'm not advocating that teachers are underpaid, but what I am saying is perhaps the really good teachers, we need to bend over backwards to keep them happy. We need to bend over backwards to reward them and treat them like the treasure that they are to our children. Whether they're a government school teacher or a private school teacher, we want to show them that we value them. But are we doing that when we're paying for bureaucrats? Are we doing that when we're allocating it to the temple of football? I would suggest to you that our crisis in government education is less about not having enough money and more about properly funding things in the first place. It shouldn't be lost on you, though, when we're doing this reality check, that many of those demands for the extra accountability, which the bureaucracy is allegedly going to provide, or the temple to the sports gods, were driven by parents. Not all, but enough. Perhaps influential parents. Read that how you want. Perhaps specific board members. Read that how you want. I'm just suggesting that when you have a bond package for millions, tens of millions, millions of dollars, if you can only get 5% of that population to show up and vote for it, even if you should get 75% of that 5% of the vote, I'm really not comfortable that you had a mandate to spend that money. Just saying. I think maybe, just maybe, you ought to pull all the parents of all the students that are actually getting your product to see if you, the product provider, are worthy of more money. But again, that's never going to happen really with school choice. That's really never going to be dealt with at the state level. But maybe, just maybe, and outside thought here, if we were to, elect some school board members that had some stones, we elect some school board members that go in there and ask questions, we could take that step in the right direction. We could maybe salvage or improve the education system that is actually, in my opinion, working how it was designed, and just improve it 2%, 5%. And you do that consistently over time, maybe we actually do provide a valuable service. If you're worried about children staying home with their parents educating them, if you're worried about those children vacating the government schools to go to private schools, perhaps, just perhaps, if you were to up your game. Perhaps if you were to offer things that, quite frankly, are so valuable to parents that they'll choose to keep your students in your school in the first place. Perhaps if you did something different, or you tried something innovative, or, set aside one of your campuses to do something entirely different out of the norm and see how that plays out. I mean, you already have a near monopoly on the students. You already have a near monopoly on the amount of money that you get. What are we getting for it? So if you want to be upset and you want to be mad about school choice, and you want to blame the governor for him probably being successful pushing through some variation of this session, you really ought to consider, what part of that as a school district do you own? What part of that as a superintendent do you own? What part of that as a school board member do you own? What part of that as a principal do you own? What part of that as a school teacher that says nothing, that is afraid to speak out for their students, for their fellow teachers, do you hold? So rather than getting mad and trying to torpedo, which I think is an imperfect solution, by the way, of school choice, perhaps you start speaking out on we could do better, or the other things that we could do in lieu of what we've been doing. Perhaps we could, embrace change in a positive way, and instead of celebrating some of the nonsense that we've been celebrating, look at how do we better serve our students. So my biggest concern is that I want you to take away from you this episode, which admittedly went a little long. They're talking about school choice, but what choice are they really giving you? If government is going to control all the schools, is it really a choice? And with that, this has been According to Callus, and I will see you on the other side.
Wanted. Young men to rebuild Western civilization. Must be unafraid of pain, blisters, intellectual rigor, and a lifetime of long shifts with swords and shovels, digging ditches, repelling invaders, and reading stacks of books taller than their fathers. Must be impervious to manipulative women of all sorts, giggling virgins, cyber skanks, and even full cauldrons of Karens or hand-wringing clergy, but always seeking to hear and heed the words of Lady Wisdom. Immune to the leadership of hypocrites and LARPing online masculinitods, unaffected by abusive authorities, petty professors, and all brokers of official respectability. Willing to hoist the Jolly Roger and Johnny Cash's favorite finger whenever faced with idolatry. Long-suffering joy and determination required. Must be willing to dwell among the tombs and graves of the long dead, seeking truths that cannot die. Exhaustion guaranteed. Conflict guaranteed. Mortality guaranteed. New St. Andrews College. Liberal arts for the undaunted.